The district tournament is quite different than other tournaments and has a different set of guidelines and rules. So it's really useful for you to know the rules ahead of time so you can wrap your head behind what's going to happen and put yourself in the best position to succeed. So first, let's talk about qualification. That's what is at stake at the district tournament. If our district level is level 2, which we typically are in Northwest Indiana, then the top 2 entries in the event qualify. It does not matter if you're first or if you're second, just top 2 qualify. If we happen to be in a year where we have dropped down to level 1, then you need 16 entries in the event in order to qualify 2. You can benefit if you get all the way up to 30 entries, you're able to qualify 3, but the Northwest Indiana District has never achieved that before. How do you help us achieve level 2 status? Earning as many NFL points as possible. Last year's status determines this year's status. That ultimately means last year's team being able to get all of the NFL points that they could have created the status level that we're at, and you want to play that forward. If you're in a partner event and you qualify, you must go in that partner event, even if you qualify in a later solo event, such as speech. The only exception is going to be if you and your partner both qualify in a solo event and choose to go there. So just be aware that if you do qualify with a partner, you can't ditch out of that partner. So what's the competition like? You are guaranteed 4 preliminary rounds, just like typical Indiana tournaments, but there's a couple of differences. First, it will be determined based upon availability and what's possible, whether you have 1 judge or 3 judges. The goal has always been to ensure that we have 3 judges per round. That gives you a panel and limits the craziness of one squirrel judge. However, availability of judging may not allow that. Whatever you start with in round 1, it's going to continue with throughout the entirety of the tournament. The first 2 rounds are randomly set. There is 0 power matching in these rounds. There are criteria for how they are paired, however. They go in order from most important to least important. So the most important thing in rounds 1 and 2 is that you are protected from any one of your teammates. School protect is the number 1 thing. Second of all, you shouldn't hit the same person twice. That means your round 2 opponent should not be the same as your round 1 opponent. You also shouldn't debate on the same side twice if it's Lincoln Douglas and policy debate. Public forum, you will always do a coin flip. We don't pay attention to your sides. But that means if you're neg in round 1 for LD, you know that you're going to be AF for round 2. And you can look at the pairing in the schematic and narrow down who is possible for you to hit so you can prepare for them between rounds. You also shouldn't get 2 buys. That would be ridiculous. You also, if possible, shouldn't debate opponents from the same school. That means if your round 1 opponent was from Munster, you shouldn't hit another Munster team in round 2. But again, this is lower in the criteria, so it may possibly happen for small divisions. And lastly, schools should only get 1 bye. So if you're the lucky Chesterton debater in the Lincoln Douglas division that gets the bye, the other 3 Lincoln Douglas debaters won't be able to. This gives us a segue to talk about the schedule and downtime. Particularly if we're going to have 3 judges, it means that Lincoln Douglas, Public Forum, and Policy will probably not be able to run on the same schedule. They will have to flight them. Very typically with PF and LD being the ones that are flighted because their event is half as long as a policy debate round. That means even though this is a smaller tournament than normal, the schedule will be stretched out. We begin debate Friday night, and the goal is to get 2 rounds in each event. But if we don't hit it by a certain time, we may only get 1 round in for that event. We're going to prioritize larger divisions because they will last longer, just because of the nature of how districts works. So just be aware that you might be waiting for a round for more than an hour from your previous round. This can be incredibly stressful at districts because this is a high-stakes tournament with national qualification on the line. There's a couple of things to think about. First, if you know how the pairing goes, you can start mathematically figuring out who you're most likely to hit. That gives you time to prep against them in between rounds. Second of all, you need to figure out ways to keep yourself active during that downtime. All of the studies tell you that being on your screen too much, particularly your phone playing video games, turns your brain kind of towards mush. We encourage you to bring things like board games, appropriate ones, because judges are watching you and listening to you, and if you are cursing during that, that forms an opinion that is not the opinion you want. But it allows you to interact with your peers and keep your brain fresh going so you don't go a little districts crazy. It's really important that you have a plan to deal with that downtime, particularly in the later rounds where you may not know if you won or lost, and you may or may not be eliminated, and then you have to wait for 2.5 hours to be able to find out. That can mess with you, and figuring out good, positive distractions to deal with that is important to making it to the end of districts. So after the first 2 rounds, which are preset, you have rounds 3 and 4. They are seeded at this point in time. So what is your seed? What is your position? Are you first, second, third? Here's how they're based upon. First, the number of rounds you've won, so the 2 O's. Second of all, the highest ballot count. Now, if there's only 1 judge per, that would still be the 2 O's. But perhaps we've got 3 judges, and there are some 2 O's that are 6-0 with ballots, and some 2 O's who barely squeaked through, and they've got 4 total ballots. Next is the highest speaker points, dropping high and low. Then the highest total speaker points, ignoring the dropping of high-low. The lowest average opponent seed, that's strength of competition. And lastly, a coin flip or random number. So based upon that criteria, you will be seeded 1, 2, 3, 4, just like an award ceremony. Now it comes time to pair round 3 first of all, and then the same aspect for round 4. But it won't be lagged, meaning that it will be up to date based upon what's going on. So first off, it's high-low in brackets. What that means is you take the highest 2-0 and put them against the lowest seeded 2-0. You do not put a 2-0 versus an 0-2. So high-low within brackets. You are supposed to avoid repeat matchups, so you shouldn't hit a team that you've already hit. Second of all, you should avoid anybody from your school. The only reason you would hit somebody from Chesterton is going to be if it was impossible to do it because you've hit everybody else already and you can't avoid repeat matchups. Next is side equalization. That doesn't really matter in round 3, but round 4, if you are due to go AF, you will have to go AF. Then bracket position, where you at within the seeding bracket. And if you get a bye in round 3, it typically is a bad sign. There are some exceptions mathematically that this can be. However, the bye should be going to somebody who's got 0 wins. Now, if that school has already had the bye, if that team has already had the bye and it moves on up, ultimately it means that it may go up as well. So, in the prelims, you have school protect for the most part, with only a few exceptions could be possible to break that. You're going to have either 1 judge or 3 judge, and you have to win those ballots. The tournament will get power matched in rounds 3 off of 1 and 2, and round 4 will be based off of 1, 2, 3. That means there's going to be automatically time built in between rounds while we make sure the pairing priorities get done. Always pay attention to what the tab room is doing and where your coaches are. Be sure to check in with us if you have any questions throughout the tournament. So after the 4 rounds of prelims, there is an add-on elimination tournament. Northwest Indiana has traditionally done a single elimination bracket. Now, if only 2 teams break, then ultimately the tournament's over. But if 4 teams break, they're then going to have a round to determine who are the qualifiers. So how do you get into these elimination rounds? Any team that is either undefeated or has just 1 loss will advance into the elimination portion. This means there's no guaranteed number of how many are going to qualify, and thus the bracket is somewhat hard to predict. It could be that you advance into elimination rounds and receive a bye at that point in time. In all elimination rounds, you will have at least 3 judges. That's going to create a panel situation for you. Remember that it's important to adapt to each and every single judge, as well as talking to each angle towards it, because you've got to convince them that you've won, at least 2 of those judges. In Lincoln Douglas and policy debate, you will flip a coin to determine which side you are, unless you've already hit them. This bracket will be set up purely based upon seeding. So if 4 teams break, number 1 is going to debate seed number 4. If that is Chesterton and Chesterton, they will debate for a single elimination round, even if seed 2 and 3 are Penn and Penn. At this point in time, there is no school protect. You protect yourself by having the best seed possible, because it means you'll be getting an opponent who has the lowest seed possible. So LD and policy will do a coin flip, unless they've already hit before, in which case they would be side lock. As always, public forum will continue to flip. They do it every single round. Protests. Protests are a little bit different in the postseason because we recognize that there is an obligation to protect ourselves. And the best way we protect ourselves is to know what the rules and the procedures are. So first, keep in mind, we do not like to do protests. We are hesitant and resistant to it. Second of all, keep in mind that if you protest and don't win the protest, you can lose the round because of it. So you can't just throw out words and accusations. We need to know exactly what the rule is and exactly what the violation is, and we need to be confident about it. We prefer that the protest is done in the round. We don't randomly throw out protests, and appeals or actual protests need to come from a coach if they are out of round. So if you don't do it in round, you rely on your coaches deciding whether the protest happens or not. This protest must be in writing, and it also must be done in a timely manner, meaning you can't wait to find out that you did not break and then protest round 3 when you should have done it right away after round 3. Essentially, you can't wait till you know you won or lost. You have to protest blindly. The rules are in the Speech and Debate Unified Manual. Just Google Speech and Debate Unified Manual, and you'll be able to cut cards about rules, print them out, be able to know exactly what's going on. The rest of this video is going to be about those rules, and so if you're not concerned about this or you want to do it on your own, that's perfectly fine. So what are these evidence rules? Here's the main highlights that happen. Number 1, cites. The district manual tells us that oral source citation in all debates, contestants are expected to, at a minimum, orally deliver the following when introducing evidence in a debate round: primary author's last name and year of publication. Any other information, such as source, author's qualification, etc., may be given but not required. So you can speed cite in this tournament. The written source, however, must have all of the other good stuff: article title, URL, etc. Paraphrasing. Note that it does not designate rules about paraphrasing in PF and LD. It just talks about paraphrasing evidence, which technically means you can paraphrase in policy debate, even though we don't. Here's what it says. If paraphrasing is used in a debate, the debater will be held to the same standard of citation and accuracy as if the entire text of the evidence were read. Paraphrasing may be used to shorten or clarify one specific portion of an original source. It should not be confused with general summary of the entire book, chapter, study, etc. So essentially, they should take a card and they should paraphrase that card. They should not paraphrase a 150-page study with one sentence. They are held to the same standard as though they read it if they paraphrased it. The next subject is availability of evidence. Here's what it tells you. In all debate events, for reference, any material, evidence, cases, written citations, etc. that is presented during the round must be made available to the opponent and or judge during the round if requested. When requested, the original source or copy of the relevant pages of evidence read in the round must be available to the opponent in a timely fashion during the round and or judge at the conclusion of the round. So if you read evidence in there or cite something, you have to make it available if it is requested. They do have to have marked the evidence, meaning they can't give you evidence that is not underlined or read if they had claimed to have read it. That'll just slow you down in the learning process. Communications with the author are not admissible pieces of evidence, so they can't have researched or emailed their topic author and spat something back. It has to be publicly available. So what are the violations? There's two ways that they phrase evidence violations. The first is distorting evidence. That means you've added or deleted words which significantly alter the conclusion of the author. Second of all is non-existent evidence. That means that there is evidence without an original source. The original source is different than what they say. It is paraphrased inaccurately, or debaters refuse to give it in a timely manner. So how do we resolve an evidence violation when it occurs? Here's what they tell you. Judges are responsible for resolving disputes. When the judges have a dispute, they must make a written note on the ballot or inform the TAB committee. These decisions may not be appealed. Now, speech and debate is used to a high-level quality of judge, typically former debaters or coaches who know the rules. Our judge pool is not that. So it's very difficult when the rules are that the judge decides instead of a group of TAB coaches. If you think they are distorting or using non-existent evidence, first make a definitive indication that you are formally alleging a violation of an evidence rule. You also need to articulate that evidence rule. Is it 7.2a, 7.2b, or 7.23c? This means ultimately you need to brief the rules manual or print it out or have a copy to be able to make available. Now here's where it gets interesting. Once you have formally accused somebody of violating one of those three rules, the judge is supposed to stop the round and adjudicate it. If the judge determines that the allegation is legitimate and an evidence violation has occurred, the team/individual that committed the violation will be given a loss in the round. The round essentially ends. If the judge determines the allegation is not legitimate, so if you made an accusation that the judge does not agree with, the team making the challenge will receive the loss. You have to be very, very clear and know exactly what's going on before you throw out an allegation. Now, you can still challenge the quality of their evidence. You can make an informal in-round argument regarding their credibility without making a formal allegation. So let's say that it got too far, you don't want to make a formal allegation, you can stop the process and say, we're not making a formal allegation, but we are making an informal one. Now, if that happens after the round, we can still try to protest. Within 20 minutes, the coach must inform TAB of the appeal. You then get 20 minutes to put together a case. There are strict times on this, which means if your coach is judging and you can't get to them in time, you need to let TAB know that you think there's a problem, but you don't have access to your coach. That will allow permission to get that clock to go a little bit further. Internet use. You likely will be able to use internet at the tournament. Each district gets to decide its own policy, and in the past, Northwest Indiana has. There is no guarantee that the school makes their Wi-Fi available. If there is an equity issue, however, there is an equity officer at the tournament that can help resolve those types of things. So if you believe there's some level of unfairness happening in the tournament, there is a system in place where you can protest that as well. As always, prepare yourself ahead of time, put yourself in the right frame of mind to be successful, set up through your work and your arguments and your confidence that you are prepared, ready to go, and prepared for everything within districts. As always, good luck.